Of course, we all remember when the photos came out showing the Border Patrol agents on horseback that appeared to be, I mean, they very much appeared to be whipping migrants who were trying to come into the US across the Rio Grande. It's sort of that thing where it's like, you just have this moment that's captured in time. And yes, it tells a story, but sometimes it can tell the wrong story. So this one photo that was taken and published, and honestly, the person who took it should have known better initially that it appeared to show something that it didn't show. But everybody jumped onto it, and understandably so. Like, look, if you have Border Patrol agents who were whipping migrants, that's a problem, right? But it just shows this culture of jumping to conclusions. You guys will remember that President Joe Biden at the time had some very strong words for these Border Patrol agents.
You said on the campaign trail that you were going to restore the moral standing of the U.S., that you were going to immediately end Trump's assault on the dignity of immigrant communities. Given what we saw at the border this week, have you failed in that promise? And this is happening under your watch. Do you take responsibility for the chaos that's unfolding?
Of course I take responsibility. I'm president, but it was horrible what to see, as you saw. To see people treated like they did, horses barely running them over, people being strapped, it's outrageous. I promise you those people will pay. They will be, an investigation underway now, and there will be consequences. There will be consequences. It's an embarrassment, but it's beyond an embarrassment. It's dangerous. It's wrong. It sends the wrong message around the world. It sends the wrong message at home. It's simply not who we are.
And of course, not long after that, you had even some journalists come out and say, no, they weren't whipping migrants. These are split reins that they use to control the horses. The photo is just sort of out of context. And so this was debunked pretty quickly. However, there was an official investigation done. We'll talk about the findings of it. It's not going to be a surprise. It found that they weren't whipping migrants. We'll talk about that in a moment. But again, I think it goes to the real danger of jumping to conclusions, even when something seems very obvious. And I'm going to take an L here. I had to learn this lesson the hard way. You guys will remember Nick Sandmann. He is the young man who was caught on video, apparently, it looked like, harassing a Native American man at the Lincoln Memorial. And this clip of that video was put out there, went viral. And at the time when I saw it, I'm like, wow, this little kid is like a total piece of and needs better parenting. I was totally against Nick Sandmann because I guess in that moment, I didn't think that there could be a video that would show more that would change my mind. And of course, we know that Nick Sandmann was the one who was harassed, and he was just sort of standing his ground in that moment. It led to Nick Sandmann suing some mainstream media outlets and getting big payouts. But that was a big lesson for me. Like, oh gosh, you really need to pump the brakes and not have an instant visceral reaction to something. Because, you had this story about the whipping of migrants that dominated the media when there was other things happening at the border that should have been getting that attention, like the surge of migrants across the border that led to this incident in the first place. So anyway, this official findings of the investigation are out. And not only do they, clear the agents of wrongdoing in terms of the whipping that never was, but it also talks about some of the really severe circumstances of that day that were unfolding and just paints a really vivid picture of the crisis at the southern border. And so I spoke earlier today with unDivided contributor Ali Bradley, who's of course been covering border issues extensively, and she got her hands on the full internal investigation. Ali Bradley, thank you so much for being back on unDivided. This is interesting stuff. We kind of knew a long time ago that these Border Patrol agents hadn't whipped Haitian migrants. There was the photo, and then it was debunked pretty quickly. And so this report basically solidifies what we already knew in that regard, right?
Yeah, you're exactly right. We saw those photos. We saw the photographer come out and say that never happened. No contact was ever made. We saw the video come out from the Associated Press, a journalist that was also there, showing that no contact was made. So this report does solidify that. However, they were never exonerated on the same public stage that they were condemned on, Brandi. So this report, not only does it outline exactly what the issues were at that situation in Del Rio on September 19th, but also identifies some of the corrective action that they're taking It does not talk about the discipline that they're seeking out. However, a DHS source does tell me that they are going to be disciplined. They will be seeing a 14-day unpaid suspension. However, their supervisors can decrease that if they deem it necessary. But yeah, it's really interesting because some of the things that we heard about on Friday from the Customs and Border Protection Commissioner, Chris Magnus, don't necessarily line up with what I'm reading in this DHS investigation that I got my hands on through a DHS source.
So let's hit the brakes for a second because you mentioned, nobody was whipped, right? But there's still going to be probably some discipline here because there's some separate things that came up as part of the investigation. Can you talk about what those are?
Yeah, so a couple of those things are unprofessional behavior based on the grounds of what they would deem professionalism. So they believe that some of these agents, after going through all of these reports, did conduct themselves unprofessionally in some ways. One of them grabbing a migrant by the shirt. We saw that in some of those images. Another one was some derogatory statements that were deemed as discriminatory in this report, where one of the agents had yelled something at the migrants, saying, "This is why your country is expletive. You treat your women like this." And in this report, it also goes through and kind of corroborates what this Border Patrol agent was saying, that this man that he was kind of trying to stop from going back and forth between Mexico and the United States was actually shielding himself behind women and children. So he was saying, that was a frustrated comment that he made. He didn't mean for it to be discriminatory, but obviously that's what it was deemed. And it's pretty hard to look at it in any other way.
Yeah. So, and you can say it on here. You might not, but he said, this is why your country is shit, right? Because you treat your women and children like this. And he contends, and the report backs it up, that it was because he was like using women and children as shields. But as you said, he still has to conduct himself professionally. And obviously that's not professional. And then the use of force incident with the t-shirt grabbing. So one of the other things, and really quickly, I want to just put a bow on the whipping thing, right? I don't want to spend a lot of time dwelling on that because the nation has been dwelling on that for like 10 months. There are some Republicans who believe, including House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, that President Biden owes those Border Patrol agents an apology for saying last September that they will pay for what they did. What do you think, Allie? Do you think the president's going to offer up an apology to these agents?
I mean, I think that the closest thing that we got to exoneration for these men was on Friday. I don't think that there's going to be, like I said in the beginning of this conversation, that there's going to be public exoneration like there was condemnation. I think that there's a degree where they deserve some kind of public exoneration because they have been sitting on desk duty. They have been receiving death threats as soon as this happened. These men that were involved, their life is upside down because of this. There's photos that, the photos heard around the world. And it sent shockwaves. And there's no denying that these photos made people feel uncomfortable in some capacity. But the fact of the matter is that they didn't make contact, and that in the report, it says that there was no evidence that a migrant was struck or whipped in any capacity. And, they were also talking about the twirling of the split reins, because that's something that advanced riders use and know. And as soon as this story came out, horse people, equestrian people knew instantly that these weren't whips, that they were split reins. And when you twirl the reins, it's apparently a tactic that helps move the horse in a certain direction and really gain control of that horse backwards, forwards, left, and right. And that's something that Chris Magnus said was not displayed in training, was not taught to these Horse Patrol unit members. However, I can tell you that the acting program manager for the National Horse Patrol program was interviewed in this entire investigation. And she said she's actually been an instructor since 2004. And she watched all of the footage, Brandi. She went through all of the images and said that these agents used the tactics that were necessary and the tactics that were taught to them in this situation. And it did not look like they were ever endangering any of the migrants with their horses. Some of them were saying in this report that there was unnecessary force by using those horses to kind of maneuver around and kind of get those people in a corralled setting kind of. But this person who's in a role where they're training these gentlemen and women saying, no, this was exactly the techniques that we would have taught, that we do teach. And so that didn't really line up with what Commissioner Magnus was saying at all. Publicly, he said that was not something that they learned in training. So the condemnation kind of continued in that press conference as well on Friday.
So for the sake of optics, are they going to change what these horseback agents are allowed to do with these split reins in the future?
I wouldn't say that they're going to continue to train them to do that if it's in every single training module or not. I'm not sure if that's something they'll continue to do, but I will tell you that the Horse Patrol unit will remain. It will continue to operate. It is one of the oldest units in the Border Patrol, and they're going to continue to use it, but they're not going to use it in the capacity of crowd control. That's a big issue here too, Brandi, because I learned that in this report, most of the agents that were involved were never trained in crowd control, especially on horseback. Now, Chief Raul Ortiz wanted these Horse Patrol units to be present, wanted it in full force in case there was an uprising, because there was talk about Title 42 being implemented, these people being repatriated or sent back to Mexico. And I remember sitting down there under that bridge with the sheriff. And when that word got out, 202, I believe, DPS troopers were deployed to kind of encircle that entire area in case a kind of riot or some kind of uprising did occur. So these Horse Patrol unit members were put in place to be prepared for crowd control, something that they had no idea what to do. They were even told to shut down the boat ramp. They had no idea what that meant. They thought it meant stop people from coming over, because when someone says shut it down at the boat ramp, that probably means to you that you're going to block people from coming into the US. So they didn't have a lot of guidance here. And they also asked for help. A Texas DPS sergeant says help never came. So they were kind of set up for a loss if you look at it that way. But going back to the crowd control piece of it, Brandi, I reached out to some of my agents who are not Horse Patrol units, who are sources of mine. I talked to them last night and I said, did you undergo any kind of crowd control training? And they all said no. That two of them that were older and that have already retired, they had academy long ago when Chief Ortiz also had academy, and he says that crowd control was more part of it. That kind of went away, and they deemed crowd control as more of a protest or a riot setting, not necessarily 500 people like what the guys on the ground are experiencing every day. But it takes one foul attitude or one misstep for something to go wrong, and these guys still have not been trained in crowd control or know what to do. However, if they're going through the academy now, there is some training that is now woven into the academy that helps them know how to mitigate a situation when you're dealing with 200 to 500 people a day, like what they're seeing right now.
And to me, this is just an example of what happens in a lot of major news stories in this country, where it's this idea of selective outrage and people get distracted by a shiny object. Now, had they been whipping migrants, clearly that would have been a serious issue, but it was debunked so quickly, yet it continued to be, the bulk of the topic of conversation, as opposed to what you just detailed, which is how overrun these agents were, how they weren't trained to do what they were being asked to do, how they called for backup and didn't get any. To me, that's the more important story. That's the bigger story, not some debunked horsewhipping incident.
Well, and to go with that, Brandi, in the report, it also states, based on several agents' testimony, that the quarterly training that they're supposed to have, even if, say, they did have some training to mitigate a situation where there was an uprising or anything like that, because they don't all get the exact same training, from what I can understand from talking to my sources as well. They say that this is more reserved for BORTAC, things like that. But what's really interesting is that a lot of them haven't had the training since early 2021, if they had it at all. And then the other side of that is the quarterly trainings were pushed off because of processing migrants, an influx of migrants. So they haven't even been able to undergo their trainings or brush up on any of their training in any capacity, not just crowd control, because the quarterly trainings have been pushed because of lack of resources. I mean, that's what the overwhelming and overarching problem has been since I've started covering the border issue in the first place is, there's not enough manpower to do what they're doing. And they, on Friday last week, they even pulled back, they recalled every agent from the field in both Brackettville and Carrizo Springs, which is in the Del Rio sector, the busiest sector. They pulled them for transport and processing. So that means unmanned border. That's exactly what that means. So you don't have guys out in the field. Meanwhile, in Brackettville, they had just arrested a known rapist, a sex offender. So, those are the kinds of things that aren't able to be caught if you have everybody inside for processing and transport. They just don't have the resources.
Yeah, and it's just, people get mad. And I agree with the decision not to have people on horseback deal in crowd control. I agree with that in a regular protest that's not at the border, just because you're talking about an animal in the mix of people, and I just feel like there's so many things that can go wrong. But for people who don't want Border Patrol agents doing crowd control, well, you have to deal with the immigration crisis then, so you don't have crowds coming across the southern border. Allie, you've been down there for, what, a year now?
Next month will be a year, yeah.
Has it gotten any better, do you think? Are we on any sort of positive trajectory?
I wish I could say that it felt like it was getting better. Every single time I go down to the border, it's with the intention of finding out, are policies in place? Are things in place to mitigate what's going on? Are additional resources being brought in? What does that look like? And every month it gets worse. I mean, you are seeing what the governor is doing right now, where he signed that executive order late last week saying that DPS and National Guard could start sending people back across the port of entry. Now, they can't cross the legal boundary into Mexico, but they can bring them to the port of entry and basically say, go back across the border. And that's what we saw Sheriff Coe do as well. So people are taking matters into their own hands. So if things were getting better, you wouldn't have to do that. The federal response would be enough, and it's just not. That's the governor's biggest issue right now. And I mean, right now, we've got 25 counties that are on board with declaring an invasion. We have Ken Paxton saying he wants to declare an invasion, who's the attorney general. We have the lieutenant governor saying, comparing to what's happening at the border to Pearl Harbor. So when you see things like that and the governor signs an executive order that's obviously going to just completely be annihilated by federal courts, because this is a state versus federal issue. And the only way around it is to invoke articles of the Constitution, not just sign an executive order. So it'll be interesting to see what the governor does in the coming days, what kind of retaliation he's going to get from immigration advocates and things like that. One of the immigration attorneys I work with did say there's no doubt that there's going to be pushback and backlash for this, and this will not stand in the courts.
Well, I think the Pearl Harbor comparison is stupid, but I just hate comparisons in general. But, it is serious what's going on at the border.
But yeah, to say that we're being attacked at the border like Pearl Harbor, I mean, I wouldn't go that far, Brandi, from what I've experienced, what I've seen. I even asked the former, excuse me for kind of escaping on his title, but Mark Morgan was a head of CBP, was top notch, and he worked in the FBI. And, he was saying, I asked him, I said, is there a less abrasive word? I mean, you know me, I have to always kind of ask the opposite side of things. So, because it kind of, elicits a visceral response when you say invasion. And he said, you know what, you're right, but that is the law. That's what the constitutional code reads, and that's what they have to go with. And so he said, is there a different option? Because I said, we're still trying to get the administration, by we, I mean, America, pretty much, that's been paying attention to this border crisis, is still trying to get the federal government to get the administration to recognize this as a crisis at all. And that's just hasn't even happened. So to go that far as to say it's an invasion is, again, it's a little abrasive.
Yeah, I mean, but, look, if the Biden administration or Democrats don't want this to be in the hands of Governor Greg Abbott in Texas or the Republican control in Texas, then they can step up and do something, but they're not doing it. And so you're leaving these states along the border to fend for themselves, and then you're complaining about how they fend for themselves, and it just seems really silly. Allie Bratt, go ahead.
The government, though, thinks what they're doing is the humane side of things, right? Because they're allowing people to come in and claim asylum, whether they only have an economic claim or not. These people are coming in and able to claim asylum. But the problem is the amount of people dying trying to do that. So how can this be about humanity? We talked about that. It's a hard one, to justify and say, yeah, this is obviously a humanitarian issue and needs humanitarian response, because that's just not what we're seeing.
Well, it's the same with the homeless crisis and the drug epidemic. You're allowing people to continue a behavior that is killing them. And the same with the southern border, to make it so porous that people are taking these dangerous journeys. It's killing them. We've seen that. You've seen that firsthand. And so I agree with you. I don't know how you can call that compassion or, humanitarian or anything like that. Allie Bradley, appreciate you as always. And thank you so much for just your continued insight on the border. I know it's going to be even up here in Washington State, we've got the 8th Congressional District, which is a swing seat, and they're running ads, the Republicans, about border security up in Washington State, which I find fascinating.
If it will affect every single American in some way, shape, or form, they just don't know it yet. I mean, you look at what's happening down in El Paso, and each person that gets hurt, there's 322 injuries from people falling off the border wall, $43,000 a person. Well, now El Paso is putting in, to have that money that was never paid reimbursed. And that's something that's a reality. And when you have 160 nationalities coming into our country, you have people from Senegal, Cambodia, you have people from Uzbekistan coming over. Who's teaching these children, and what are those school systems going to look like? So things are going to be dramatically different. And, I would just encourage people to open up their eyes a little bit, see it, look around, see what's going on, but also understand and be compassionate, because there are a lot of people that are coming in that do have valid asylum claims that are kind of lumped in with this mess, for lack of a better word.
That's well put. Allie Bradley, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandi Kruse.
That is my conversation with unDivided contributor Allie Bradley, who's been doing some great work down at the southern border. So you just see this sort of pattern of, shiny object. That is important. Like, had they been whipping migrants, I can understand news coverage. But again, it was debunked pretty quickly, yet they still focused on this shiny object. Well, we have a literal crisis at our southern border of people flooding into this country, a humanitarian crisis and a public safety crisis. Absolutely both of those things. So I think that's the fault of the media, and it's the fault of politicians who glob onto things quickly because it suits whatever political agenda they might have in the moment. If you like this video, make sure to become an unDivided subscriber to help us grow this mission to give common sense a comeback. You can do that in two ways: at patreon.com/undivided, or by becoming a contributor on my locals community, brandikruse.locals.com. Thank you to the founding sponsor of unDivided, 1530 Mortgage. Visit them at 1530mortgage.com.